Hi, and welcome everyone to our PD seminar. We're happy to have you here today. My name is Lydia, and I'll be moderating the session today. Over the summer, I was the Youth Film Festival coordinator for FCYFF, and I'm excited to be back helping out with this seminar. We are here as a festival to support you as teachers, so please give us feedback if you can. Submissions for the 2021 Youth Film Festival are now open. Our categories are narrative, documentary, experimental, pitch, animation, music video, and promo video. Our categories cross multiple subjects, so please urge your students to submit their film. Any high school student in Southwestern Ontario can submit. There's no submission fee. Head over to our website, fcff.ca, and go over to the Youth Fest page where you'll find out what we're all about. There will be some additional resources for your students as well. As always, you can head over to the Educators portal to view our past seminars, including this one. This one will be recorded for you all to view later. We have Katie here with us today. She is an art teacher at Oak Ridge with TVDSB, and she'll be telling us about the importance of media and how integrating media can benefit your class and your teaching goals. Matt Brickman is also here with us today. Matt is a professor in the Faculty of Advanced Filmmaking at Fanshawe College, and he will be showing us how to create a great video using a handheld device, a smartphone or a tablet. So after Matt's presentation, we are going to have a short Q&A. So if you have any questions for Matt, please type them in the chat and we will answer them after his presentation. And now I'm going to pass things off to Matt. Please, presentation.
Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Brickman, as Lydia said, and happy to be here today to present to you about mobile production and mobile post-production. So we're going to talk about some techniques and tools around both of those. And before we get going, I just want to introduce myself. I teach at Fanshawe College, as Lydia mentioned. I teach in the advanced filmmaking program, and I also teach in the visual effects and editing program. So I teach in both of those post-grad programs, and I teach mostly post-production. But I do have production experience, and I do teach production sometimes. And we'll talk a bit about production today, as well as some post ideas for working on a mobile platform, whether that's an iPad, iPhones, or Android phones and tablets. All these, everything we're going to talk about today is kind of can be used in any of those worlds. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen and get things set up here. And all right, there we go. I'm just going to present. I wanted to say too up front that this presentation is available as a PDF for distribution. So it has a bunch of links in it about many things we're going to talk about. Almost every picture has a link to something, whether that's the image source or another resource. So if you want that, you can get that through the Forest City Film Fest. So I wanted to, what I'm going to do today is spend 30 minutes talking about all of these topics. So we're going to define mobile production, talk a bit about the art of it and the access, and then we're going to get into some specific techniques and tools, and then talk a bit about some resources and stock content at the end. And then, as Lydia said as well, I'll have time for some questions and answers at the end. I wanted to start by defining mobile production. And so what I'm going to talk about today is kind of mobile production from a film and video perspective. But I want you to kind of keep an open mind in this world, because I know we're all working virtually, we're all teaching virtually. And mobile production for you, maybe moving forward, could be in a different area. It might not just be photo or sorry, film or video. It could be photography, websites, audio, podcasting, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to kind of lay that out that it's kind of a big broad world and what you can do with mobile devices, of course, from a content creation perspective. And so whatever ideas you have for your classes, you can implement them. And I hope you get some out of what we're going to talk about today from a film and video perspective. I wanted to first, before we get into the tools themselves, I want to talk kind of the art of mobile and some of the positives or pros of mobile production is that it's accessible to the world essentially. So if you have a mobile device, you can create content and you can distribute that content across many different platforms. And so the accessibility of it, and because it is relatively low budget, depending on the phone you buy and the apps you use, but it is low budget compared to kind of bigger production using bigger cameras and locations and things like that. Also, most mobile tools have quite a short learning curve. So, downloading a free app that shoots video and kind of getting the basics of it is really quick. You can do it in, an hour usually or less sometimes. I also think mobile is creatively liberating for many reasons that I've talked about already. So just the accessibility of it, and instead of kind of getting bogged down with too many details or not having the right gear or something, you can kind of expose your students to being creative with their phones, and they all have them, I imagine, or most people do. So it's pretty accessible and can unlock this kind of technical but also creative world. I also wanted to talk a bit about Steven Soderbergh, who's kind of a bigger director. He's directed a bunch of Hollywood stuff, but his last two movies he's made have been made on iPhones. One's called Unsane and the other one is called High Flying Bird. And there's also a link there. So there's a couple links that go to websites that talk about those films and have trailers if you're interested in that. And then he also has a great interview about discussing production and that he only wants to use iPhones moving forward for his movies. So it's kind of interesting to see that at the high end, people are embracing mobile production. And so, why not in high school? Why not in college? So let's talk about mobile production. And we're going to talk about a bunch of techniques first in terms of capturing video and photos perhaps, and how you can kind of creatively do that and some creative ideas around creating compelling content. And then we'll talk about some tools as well. All right, so the first thing is talking about some lighting basics. And I think when you're using mobile, you can get quite good lighting just with light that you have access to, whether naturally or maybe some practical lights that you would have. So not using natural light, there's a few techniques I want to talk about. Obviously, depending on the time of day and the weather might influence this, right? If it's a sunny day or a cloudy day, it might dictate the kind of photos or video you might get. But thinking about where that light is coming from and using that appropriately is really kind of the first step to making content and shooting content that is a little more compelling. So my general rule is avoid seeing windows and frames. And if you have to see the corner of one or something, maybe it's not the end of the world, but just by and large, trying to avoid shooting into windows is really hard for phones to capture. So as you can see in the examples below there's if you're trying to expose a subject, then it might be really bright outside and therefore be overexposed behind the subject. And if you are, I'm just going to grab the tool here. And if you try and do the opposite exposure, then the subject's going to be quite dark but you can see it looks okay outside. So trying to avoid these situations is usually the best thing. Okay, again, if there's one exception here, which is if it's a creative choice, then by all means, of course, do it or have your students do it. Okay, but then this other example is kind of turning away from that window and using the natural light from that window, and you can see it looks much nicer. You don't have to kind of compete whether you're exposing inside or outside. So let's talk a bit about practical light. And from a film perspective, practical lights usually mean a practical light like a lamp that is lighting a subject and is also in the shot or in the scene itself. So the bottom left example, there's that where you can see there's a subject and there's a lamp. So that would be considered a practical light. For what we're talking about today and what I urge my students to do and what I would urge you to talk to your students about is using practical lights, whether they're in the frame or not, it's great. So if you have a lamp and let's say it's nighttime and the natural light is gone, you have a lamp and that's what you have for lighting. So use it, whether you have that practical light in the frame or not, doesn't really matter, but it's a great source of light to use. And kind of considering what kind of light it is, if you have the lampshade on or off, is something we'll talk about in the next few slides, but just using practical lights as well. It could be overhead lighting in a room, could be lamps, could be candles, could be device screens, even like using the light from a TV screen. If you have a 60-inch TV in your home or 70 or whatever, that can generate a lot of light. So maybe using that as a source might be helpful. Okay, and of course you can think of practical lights as interior or exterior. So exterior may be light from a building, light from a lamp post in a park. All of those would be considered practical lights. All right, so here's a couple of visual examples. These were videos shot on iPhone or mobile devices, and you can see that there's no windows in the shot. In the background, there's no windows, but you can tell that both of them are either using practical lighting or natural lighting. So the example on the left, you can see there's obviously a big window or something kind of off to his right, and that's what he's using as light. And then the person on the right is using some lamps or some overhead lighting to light that. But you can see that they've avoided having windows in the shot behind them. And then here's a couple of just examples of practicals kind of at the pro level. So again, a practical light is a light fixture that's lighting a subject and also being seen on camera. And so there's candles and a little lamp on the table there from Skyfall, and that is Stanley Kubrick example. And then here's a couple of examples from Better Call Saul on the left and Minority Report on the right, where they're shooting with windows in the background, but they've used the light to kind of tell the story. So again, this would be beyond what we do in college and probably beyond what you do in high school, but it just kind of gives you a pro example of how they're dealing with natural light coming through windows. And they would obviously have the crew and the gear to kind of manage all that and help it tell the story, but they've used windows in the shot to help tell the story in a creative way. All right, so I want to talk now a little bit about light and shadow. So not just considering where the light is coming from, but also the shadow that creates. So one example I've used is even the shot of mine you see, right? I've got natural light coming in from a window in front of me here, which looks good for zoom purposes. But then I've got a window over here that I've closed the blinds and therefore creating a bit of shadow in the background. So thinking about light sources, but also shadow can kind of make your shots look nicer. And so two things I want you to consider, or pass on to your students, maybe to ponder for their projects, which is what is the position and direction of the subject in relation to the light? And what is the position and direction of the light source in relation to the subject, right? So obviously you can reposition both, especially if you're using practicals. So if I have a lamp turned on and it's right in front of me, how is that going to light my face? But if I move it off to the side, how is that going to light my face? Maybe it'll create some shadow across my face. So just kind of considering those two things and just changing the angle or the degrees of relation between the two can make a big difference of how your scene or your shot can look. Okay, another thing that, especially in the last year teaching in college, students are shooting a lot on their phones and or with better cameras than that, but maybe at home a lot. So using whatever you have in your home beyond practical lights can help. So just considering what your blind situation is. Are they open? Are they closed? How does that change the light and or shadow? And then bouncing light, thinking of bouncing light off of a wall or off of tin foil to reflect something. Again, it can be really easily done at home for very low cost, right? And there's an example there of Harry Potter where they're actually bouncing some light onto characters there to fill in whatever side of their face, but you can do the same kind of thing at home with just smaller household items. Okay, and so thinking about position of light again, that left example there has 4 examples of the light being kind of high and in front of a subject, much like the lighting I have here. And then there's light maybe off to the side. It's still high, but off to the side, and that shadow that's created across the face. And then the bottom right example there is kind of light low and shining up. So just, again, little considerations of where the position of the subject versus the light can change the way your shots look. And then of course you can be creative with the Venetian blind idea that I talked about last frame, or last slide is, with the sun and the blinds half shut, you can create these cool little effects. Okay, so that's just, again, considering where the light is and where the subject is. So let's talk a bit now about composition. So we're going to talk about all of these topics here: rule of thirds, subject, action, and direction, eye level framing, or the level of the camera, and then headroom and lead room. Okay, and most mobile devices have, from a camera perspective, have a guide system. So you can go into the settings usually, or sometimes they're on by default. But if they're not, you can go into the settings and turn on guides. So this is just one example of maybe all the different guides you could choose from. Depending on the app or phone you have, it might vary. But at the very least, you can turn on a grid like this, which is called the rule of thirds grid, right? So on my iPhone, when I go into settings and turn on grid, this is what I get over top of my actual camera screen, right? And so a couple things about this is just splitting the frame into thirds from a horizontal and vertical perspective, and where you position your subjects or your objects in that can make a difference of how the viewer is going to feel, whether it's, again, a photo or video. It can make a difference of what that balance feels like. And so where those rule of thirds cross, you can see I've got them all highlighted there in blue. Those are known as PowerPoints. Okay, so oftentimes in traditional documentary framing, like you see here, usually you would have a subject's, their outside eye on one of the PowerPoints, and it's kind of nice, comfortable. And they would look across frame, which creates kind of nice, comfortable composition, right? If you break that rule and you look at this example here, again, a classic example on the top, but then on the bottom, we're breaking that rule, and maybe the viewer or that character is meant to feel trapped or uncomfortable, and it changes the feeling of the shot, right? So using that rule of thirds, again, turning on the grid on your phone, you can just see the lines and then position things accordingly based on whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So now let's talk about the camera framing. So we talked about the subject versus the light position, right? And if you change the angle of it, right, from 45 degrees to 0 or 90 degrees, it's going to change how light falls. The camera, you can do similar things where if it's eye level, like what I have here, it feels very kind of normal, and we're talking to each other. If you have low angle or high angle, obviously that would change the perspective of the viewer and therefore give a different feeling. Like maybe the subject are meant to feel small and weak, or maybe powerful and strong. So again, just raising the camera a couple feet or maybe drop it a couple feet can totally change how that shot feels. Okay, and therefore kind of help tell your story. The next thing we're going to talk about is headroom, which is just the amount of space between the top of maybe a subject's or character's head and the top of the frame. So you can see in that top example there's a lot of headroom there. And do you want that usually? Depending on the shot, but most times you don't. So again, a classic documentary interview setup, you would usually want, if it's kind of a medium shot, you would want the subject's head pretty close to the frame. But if it's a closer shot, maybe their head is even cropped a little bit. But again, using that rule of thirds and using those guides, you can kind of help choose where your subject is positioned in the frame. And the last thing we're going to talk about here is lead room, which is just, again, you could use the rule of thirds guide. And if you've got someone walking across a frame, like in these, or moving across the frame in any way, you can kind of pull from context here that if they're walking one way, you want to leave a little bit of lead room in front of. So if the character's walking, you want to leave some lead room here, or likewise the other way. And if you break that rule, if there is no lead room, and let's say the edge of the frame is here and they're walking here, maybe they feel, close to the edge, trapped again, whatever that character note might be. So again, kind of understanding the rule and then maybe breaking that rule can change how a shot or a scene might feel. One thing that is, especially at the high school level, and I was guilty of this when I was in high school, and a lot of my students in college are still guilty of this, is the lack of depth in their shots, especially from an interview perspective. So again, an example at the top there is this guy sitting on his couch right against the wall. So it's very flat and kind of bland looking, and it also creates some lighting and shadow issues where you can see a shadow on the wall right behind him, right? Whereas the bottom example, again, it's kind of a pro setup, but you can see it's a big living room and they're kind of shooting across it diagonally to use that depth. So the classic example at the high school level and in college often is we see these streeters or these interview shots where they're like standing against lockers in the hall, just back against the wall, sometimes leaning against it, or otherwise just right there against the lockers. And it just usually is a flat kind of boring shot. But if the camera turned a little bit and the subject turned a little bit, you could maybe still see the lockers, but then you're shooting down the hall and creating a lot of depth in your shot. Okay, so I always talk to my students when I'm teaching production, and even from a post-production standpoint, when you're editing something, you see a shot like that and you're like, oh, that doesn't really tell the story that well if there's lack of depth. And so here's a few more visual examples where there's some that have a lot of depth and some that don't. And so kind of an understanding of that. And again, you might want to break that because maybe you're going for that look of somebody leaning against a wall or standing against a wall. If that's the case, great. But by and large, you want to avoid that and kind of create some depth. Even if it's outside, you can have a lot of depth. Okay, instead of shooting right against, a wall there, then you come out and you can shoot in the driveway. I know they have a car there and everything, but the same rules apply, right? Okay, and the bottom right example, you can see there's like that shadow. There's lights on her, which she's quite well lit from the front, but then that shadow around the edge of her kind of creates an off-putting look from a lighting perspective. So just creating depth by using the room properly. All right, let's talk about some mobile production tools. So you can see here, all these images have links to these specific resources, and these are just, again, food for thought. I know that from a high school perspective, you have board policies that you might have to follow. So if that's the case and you can't use whatever app, then you just have to kind of work within whatever you're allowed to do, which is fine. I mean, the great thing about this mobile world is that there's so many tools out there, from built-in apps to free downloads, and most apps have similar controls, right? At the very basic level, most camera apps have exposure and focus control, and you can kind of tap and hold and lock in exposure or lock in focus or whatever it might be. So whatever it is you're allowed to use, most camera apps have kind of those basic features, and then some might have more advanced features, some might not. And then of course there's hardware you can get if you're getting your students to, and maybe your high school already has a lot of stuff like that, where they're doing podcasting and they can record on their phone with a little bit better mic than what the built-in one is, or maybe that you have a few lens adapters, or maybe students have them themselves where they just attach it to their phone and they can get wide shots or change that kind of focal length on the camera, which is cool. Okay, but again, I know some of you might use WeVideo, which is quite popular at the board level. So if that's the case, it's got, you can shoot video, you can edit video and deliver right from there. And it's a pretty great little app. So let's talk a little bit about post-production now, mobile post-production. Similar to production, we're going to talk about some techniques and some story techniques and how you can create some compelling edits, even on a mobile level. Just some basic edits can go a long way to making a video project or a film project. And then we'll talk about some apps as well, like we just did for production. So one thing that I talk to my students a lot about at the college level is organization. So when you get into post-production, it's really all about organization. And from the production world, often you're coming in with all this content that's been maybe shot from various different types of cameras and from mobile, from high-end cameras, from whatever it might be. And your job as the editor is to organize that and kind of tell a coherent story out of all that stuff coming from production. So this is a nice little visual metaphor that I like to use with my students is, as an editor, it's your job to kind of organize the closet, if you will. And part of that is, and even at the mobile level and the high school level, the main points, we talk a lot about this at Fanshawe, is just what makes you successful. And of course, there's a good balance of creative and technical skill. But then having an idea is a great start, and then you go into production and you shoot that. Then you get to editing, it might not edit together exactly as you were thinking. And that can be even at a basic level. You shoot a few shots on your phone and you're going to splice it together for an Instagram post. Maybe you change the order of the shots or whatever. So kind of keeping an open mind and just kind of listening to the content or people you're collaborating with, whatever that might be. Just being adaptable in the post process and trying different things really is what it comes down to. Okay, so to kind of just mess around creatively is a lot of fun usually, and can kind of help tell your story maybe a different way than you were planning. So this is kind of crossing both worlds of production and post, but from a post-production perspective, when you're editing, usually you want to cut together a scene or a series of shots even that have different shot sizes. So if you think about a wide shot as like the wide shot of a room or the wide shot of a certain location, like maybe a downtown square in a city or something, that could be your wide shot where you see the whole square. And then you would move into, medium wide shots, medium shots, close-ups, extreme close-ups of maybe somebody's eyes or a drink they're holding, whatever that might be. So often when I see students that come into college and then graduate 2 or 3 years later, the one big difference we see is in their first few projects, maybe it's really nicely edited maybe. And one of the big things though, is that they cut from like a medium shot to another medium shot to another medium shot. And so as they develop their skills, then they're then shooting wide shots and medium shots and close-ups and kind of everything in between. And they edit between cutting close to back to medium, back to wide, or starting wide, cutting to medium, cutting to close. So just talking to students, even at a general level, about shot sizes can make a big difference. So let's say, I remember my daughter is in high school too, and she shot a video a couple years ago that their teacher assigned a little cooking video or something. I forget what it was exactly. But even just that, you could shoot a wide shot of the room and show the stove and the prep area and whatever. And then you could shoot medium shots of maybe the stove or whatever. And then you could shoot some close-ups of things, cooking and chopping and whatever it might be. So even from that kind of simple level, having different shot sizes can make a big difference in a project. And so here's a few examples. A wide shot can be the wide shot of a room, could be the wide shot of a bigger location, like I said, and then you would move in from there. And so let's talk about a few editing techniques. And again, this is from kind of a film and video perspective, but just when you're editing content, usually it's finding the tempo or the pacing of a scene. And so one thing that helps a lot with that is cutting on action. So if you let's say I'm reaching out to open a door and I've got a wide shot, a medium shot, and a close-up of that. As I'm reaching, maybe I cut from the wide into that medium shot, and then I open the door, and as I come through the door, maybe it cuts to the close-up as I walk through. So if you think of that as action across 3 or 4 different shots or takes, and I want to kind of cut as that flow is happening. I don't ever want to cut when I'm standing still, right? You're going to kind of cut on action as I move through that doorway. Okay, so having students think about what the action is, shooting it from different shot size perspectives, and then cutting from wide to medium to close, or whatever order might make sense, can make a big difference with projects like this and creating virtual content. Or creating mobile content. So the basic idea here is that you want to avoid making cuts when things are static. And sometimes that makes sense, but most times it doesn't. When there's any action happening, you want to kind of cut while that action is flowing. And so an example here, I'll just show one example from The Mandalorian, which if you watch this scene, it's quite simple. But as you watch the cuts, it's always cutting while the characters are moving, right? They're never just standing still. Maybe they're standing still, but their arms aren't still, right? Or maybe they're bending over or whatever. So just watch this and look at each cut as the movement happens. Okay, so now, especially this pickup part where it cuts as the Mandalorian picks up Baby Yoda, right? He bends down, starts picking up, and then it cuts to that higher shot as he comes up, and it gets the close-up of Baby Yoda's face. So if you think of that, if they didn't cut on action, it would be, okay, he bends down, picks up Baby Yoda, and then stands up and is holding him, and then it cuts to the shot before he actually finishes standing up. Then that would be not cutting on action, or the opposite, right? So just even from a simple perspective, like that doorway example I gave, or this example, where as the little movements of the characters are happening, you just cut as that's all flowing together. Okay, so cutting on action is that main note. There's another example here of Hot Fuzz, which you have a link to it, but for time's sake, we'll oops, sorry, I'm just going ahead here. Didn't mean to do that. For time's sake, we'll skip through that, but there is a link in the PDF that you can watch that scene if you want. Okay, sorry, I think I got ahead here. Yeah, there we go. This is where we are. So again, from a mobile post-production standpoint, same kind of rules apply. What features are out there? What capabilities do certain apps have? Is there a cost? Is it free? There's a lot of free stuff out there, which we'll look at in a minute. But the great thing is that all editing apps have at least some basic tools for trimming, for cutting, where you can trim a shot to find that action and make that cut on action, right? So it's just kind of grabbing the beginning of the clip and trimming it down, or grabbing the end of it and trimming it down, and then put the next shot into it. And so you kind of trim and cut from there. And so at the very basic level, editing apps have those features, which is great. And it's very accessible, like we talked about earlier. And then of course, there's some apps that have some more advanced features. But again, whatever your students have access to, whatever your board allows, there's lots of choices out there that kind of fit for everyone. And so I always talk about some pro apps, much like we looked at some pro examples before, just because at the high level, there's all these kind of big editing apps that are not really mobile, but these are the big companies that make software for big productions, right? So Media Composer is used a lot in Hollywood and for big series, and same with Premiere, kind of. Final Cut 2, DaVinci Resolve is used a lot for color grading, and that. The great thing about those big companies is that most of them have a mobile version, and it's usually free. So again, there's built-in apps where you can do some basic edits, but then Adobe Premiere, for instance, has a mobile app called Rush, which is free. And you can use that to make some, and all the examples at the bottom is Premiere Rush, which you can see has some editing tools. You can add little fades. You can put some text over top if you want. You can add in a bit of music, and that's all at the mobile level and quite easy to learn and quite easy to do. But if you apply to some of the techniques we talked about, right? So learning the tool is one thing, but then if you cut on action and if you cut between different shot sizes and things like that, you can create some pretty compelling projects from a mobile perspective. Apple makes Final Cut Pro, but they also have iMovie, which is either very cheap or free. I can't remember on the mobile platform level, but same idea. You can do some basic edits, or not even basic, but some more advanced editing by adding text and music and things like that, and do an edit from a mobile device. And it goes on from there. There's WeVideo, which lets you do editing. There's GoPro, and beyond that, there's all these bigger companies that have these mobile apps that let you cut video right on your phones. And the final thing I want to talk about is stock content, which we use quite a bit at the college. And it's nice to have. If I click one of these links, it takes you out. And these are two resources. One's called Pixabay, one's called Pexels, and they're actually free stock image, illustrations, video, music sites. And you just have to make an account and you can download stuff for free. And as you can see, there's some pretty great things out there. If I go to videos, there's tons of different videos out there. And so let's say you assign a project and students can shoot some stuff in their house or at the school maybe, or wherever, but they want a couple of establishing shots, maybe to set up a scene where they are, but they can't shoot a location for whatever reason, then maybe they can go to stock footage for that. And as you can see, there's some pretty beautiful stuff out there. And these are, again, free if you join. I think a lot of these sites are owned by bigger, like Shutterstock or iStock and things like that. So these are kind of loss leaders for them. But it does kind of give you access to some content for free, and it can help, you can fill in some holes on student projects or whatever it might be. So they're great resources to use. And that's it. That's it for me. So I know we covered a lot. The PDF is available, as I said, and there's tons of links in it if you want to read more about these tools and these techniques. But if there's any questions now, I can answer any questions that are out there.
Yeah. So Matt,
Yes.
we do have a couple questions for you. One is, thank you again for the presentation. That was great.
No problem.
So one from Joseph: what do you feel is the best way to begin teaching video production? And do you have a list of topics that you cover?
Ooh, that's a great question. The best way to start teaching video production, I would, what I start with a lot is the kind of the things I talked about in this, where I talk about those. Is this the same Joseph from the first one, by the way? If it is, I think it's going to be a similar answer. I kind of talk about all these basics of composition and that, because learning the tools is definitely part of it, and teaching the tools is definitely part of it, but learning kind of the creative side as well is a great place to start. So talking about things like camera position and light position and then moving on from there, right? So composition, lighting basics, and and then kind of moving on deeper than that. And then obviously learning the tools on top of that. So you got to find this kind of creative and technical blend. And to me, as I was saying last time too, there's nothing worse than having a creative idea and not being able to pull that off because you don't know how to use the tools, right? So trying to find that balance of teaching a bit of Premiere maybe, or whatever video app you have, teaching a bit of the cameras, whatever they have access to, but then also teaching these creative ideas, and shot sizes maybe is the biggest one, which I didn't mention yet, but teaching students about shot sizes is probably the best place to start.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. When it comes to shooting on a mobile phone, would I need a tripod of any kind, or do you think for the most part it stabilizes video? Like, what would be your best advice for that?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, a lot of times you might want a tripod, but it might depend on what style of video. I know a lot of my daughter goes to the skate park here in Stratford where I live a lot, and there's a lot of, I always see high school kids like shooting on their phones and it's all handheld. So if that's the style of video, maybe it works, but a tripod is not a bad idea. And there's tons of different little tripod adapters you can get for phones. Even I've got one little, I don't have it here close to me, but it's just a little like table tripod. It's like this big. And so even that works really great for a phone, and you can put that on higher desks, or you can kind of mount it anywhere, which is great. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And I know you said this in the last seminar, but just for the people viewing now, all of the mobile apps that you suggested, we know that a lot of boards might not support these apps on school devices.
Right.
But would you say for the most part that they are user-friendly, easy to use, that type of thing?
Yes, yeah, they are definitely. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about it is even those little screen grabs I had of Rush, you can see it's pretty easy, just a few taps and you can kind of get through, adding text or doing a little trim or something. So again, it depends on the tool and maybe what you're comfortable with so far, but I think most mobile apps are pretty quick and easy to learn, no matter what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the one you say that you've used the most and have the most experience with is Rush. Is that the one you would recommend the most?
That's the one I recommend the most. I've used iMovie a little bit, but not much. So I don't know it that well, but I do know it exists, and it's not much different than Rush. But yeah, Rush is the one I've used the most, and it's pretty great. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. And just one last question from me. Have you ever had to teach your students how to make a specific type of film or video? Like, for example, in the 2021 Youth Film Festival, we have a new category, which is music video and promo video.
Okay.
So have you ever had any success teaching promo video to your students? Have you ever had that? And do you have any recommendations?
For promo videos, yeah, that's a good question. I've taught commercial, which would be in the same realm, I guess. I haven't really taught promo videos specifically, at least in the last few years, but yeah, so at Fanshawe, the courses I teach, we do look at different types of editing. So cutting dialogue, cutting on action, cutting for commercial, and so on and so forth. So I know in the undergrad too, some of my colleagues are teaching like lighting specific to music videos and maybe some lighting for corporate videos and things like that. So, and promo videos. So there is a range of skills. And what was the second half of that question?
It was I lost track too.
Okay.
But yeah, just like, what are your best like recommendations for creating a good promo video? Like, if you could just like come up with a couple like nuggets of advice for a promo
videos. Okay. I mean, one of the best things that I tell my students anyway is just watch a bunch of promo videos. If we're doing a dialogue editing, I tell them to watch some dialogue scenes and try and break down some of the edits. So for promo videos, I would say a similar thing, just watch some examples and kind of see the style of promo videos and maybe some of the techniques used. But what I would say for techniques is promo videos nowadays, they have a lot of, and even commercials too, or almost everywhere, but promo videos especially, it's always like little moving shots, like even if it's travel videos, it's like the camera slowly moving as the couple walks onto the beach or whatever it might be, right? So I think if you can get, one thing we didn't talk about is gimbals. So things where you can do, with your phone, if you can make it as smooth as possible, just little moves on the shots. Usually that's kind of what's happening a lot in the promo world right now is so gimbals is something you can put your phone on, it just stays smooth, right? And that makes a big difference, is these kind of cool little smooth moving shots.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for sharing your knowledge with us and sharing your presentation, and for sticking around for the Q&A. We really appreciate it. And now we're going to move on to the next phase of our seminar, which involves our friend Katie, who is an art teacher at Oak Ridge. And so now I'm going to pass it off to Katie, who will talk about media in the classroom.
Okay, hi, sorry. Can you hear me on my end?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, good. Hi, everyone. And thank you, Matt, so much for that wonderful presentation. I hope everybody got some good information from that. I know I did as well. I'm going to be speaking with all of you, like Lydia said, about just what it's like to bring media into the classroom. So I'm just going to start up my presentation here. Okay, can you see that? There we go. All right, excellent. Okay, so just a really brief bit about myself. They said, I'm a teacher, but I teach video art and design at Oak Ridge Secondary School here in London, Ontario. I actually have a background in art and design. I paint, but I also have been a graphic designer for years, doing things from exhibit design to catalog and branding, and a bit of video as well. One thing that I have learned, because my background isn't actually in video, is that there's a lot to learn, and it's exciting, the things that you can learn. And in this day and age, the amount of stuff that you can wrap your heads around, even looking at different videos. And in fact, my partner and I are currently producing videos to launch next January. So we're taking some of our skills we've learned over the years and we're putting them to the test. So we're going to be doing a lesson plan YouTube channel of sorts. So also on top of that, I'm on the Forest City Youth Film Festival. So I'm one of the committee members for that as well. I have a passion for art and for video, but I'll be honest with you, exploring new things means constantly looking at what's around us. And again, it's so exciting to see all the things that we have in front of us. And though it might seem daunting, it's really actually quite fun. So seeing some of the things that Matt was talking about, it's great. There's lots of apps that are free for students to use. Why would you want to introduce this into your classroom? For example, your students will be getting new skill sets, providing variety to your lessons as well, and offering options for self-expression for students, ways to give them different avenues to be able to express themselves, to talk about their ideas, and also ways to focus on different creative ways of having a project produced. So it could be a large video that you have your students do, but it could also be a video response. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a little while. But honestly, bringing media into your classroom is so rewarding in many different types of classrooms. So maybe you're looking at this now, and I'm hoping you are, because you're thinking about the idea of bringing media into your classroom. And you may be asking yourself, okay, well, that sounds great, but can I even pull this off this year? Yes. Yes, you can. It's absolutely an easy thing to do. And the one thing I just want to point out really quickly too, and we all know this, is that students love tech. And as a teacher who teaches video, I'm always impressed by the students that come into the classroom, those who have no experience in video, or even those that have experience in video, but in very basic ways, the ways that they jump onto the things that we teach and the different lessons that we have to offer and the different equipment and different editing tools that we show, they are eager and ready to learn. We have to remember that students are already in this amazing world of ways of communicating with each other and the world around them through platforms like TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram. They are already keen on expressing themselves through video. So it won't be something that will intimidate a student, by my own opinion, even if your students are a bit younger or don't have access to a device at home that could get them onto a app such as this, maybe parents don't allow them to, they are very aware of what's going on around them and what their other peers are up to, or going on YouTube and just seeing all the excellent things that youth are doing now in video online. And most students want to jump on board with that. So different ways when you're looking at students, they already have that good grasp, like I was saying before. So just to touch base on a few of those, social platforms, a lot of them offer the opportunity to do video. Sharing with family and friends, as simple as taking videos already at home on vacations, just around the house. Something goofy my brother's doing, Mom, can I have your camera so I can take a video of what he's doing? They already have a general idea of how to do it. Gaming videos, they're filming themselves gaming, they're out there creating how-to videos, and they're often sharing them on video platforms. Now I'm speaking about maybe more of a high school student, but however, that being said, there is actually a wonderful arrangement of students out there that are younger and creating their how-to videos on the stories that they're learning in class, things that they want to share with the world, and they're young children too. So there's lots of options for kids to do with video, and basically things that they're already really keen on doing to begin with. So I think the idea of introducing it to your class now might just simply be, okay, what hurdle as a teacher do I need to get past then? Because I don't think the students have much of a hurdle, in my own opinion. When we look at software and equipment, all right, here's our biggest hurdle, in my opinion. So the software can be expensive, though, as we saw in Matt's presentation, there are so many wonderful apps out there. And usually there are certain apps in his list that will be accepted by your board. So it's worth taking a look and seeing. As for equipment, it could be as simple as just your cell phone. It could be bringing in a tripod for your classroom. It could be, like Matt had said as well, a gimbal that your cell phone can be mounted into. But some of these things we do understand cost as well. So filming in itself could be a beautiful DSLR camera, but if budgeting doesn't really fit to that, then perhaps it is simply just a handheld device. And handheld devices today are incredible at creating some pretty good shots. So one of the things that teachers usually kind of get also a little bit worried about too isn't just the equipment and the software, but it also could just be the fact that, my gosh, learning a new way of getting my students involved in the classroom, perhaps it might feel overwhelming because I have to wrap my head as well around the tech or the apps. Maybe you might be limited to the actual equipment you have on hand, which is very understandable. And also that might affect accessibility for students. How do I make sure that everybody has access? Now, just to touch base for a second on software, it's an interesting thing to point out that in the past, editing, for the most part, you weren't necessarily finding software that was so flexible. Now, obviously, it's a very different world that we live in. So before, programs were sprawling, costly, time-consuming, amazing tools, but maybe not for somebody who maybe just starting out. It might be a bit intimidating. Now, again, like Matt had mentioned, access is free on most of your devices. So you've got something like iMovie on your phone, or simple as the phone app itself. Basic video editing that you can go in, take a video, and use basic editing skills like coloring or perhaps cutting different parts of your video to the way that you'd like it. But what's lovely about this too is that it's user-friendly, it's streamlined, it's all in one place, and you can create it on the fly. And the wonderful thing about this too is because a lot of our students might have a device or have access to a device in your classroom like a tablet, it's wonderful to have them go out there with this in their hands, ready to go anywhere. Give them that opportunity to take charge of their own project, film it all, edit it all, and then ship it off, send it off in one application, making the whole process very easy for a student to handle and for you as well on your end to receive on whatever platform you're using, like Google Classroom, or perhaps you may be using Brightspace as well. Now, on top of the video that you could just take on a device or on a camera, another wonderful app, and I'm sure many of you know about it, and if you don't, please take a chance to go and take a look because it's a wonderful, wonderful app. It's free. It's called Flipboard, or sorry, not Flipboard, Flipgrid. And Flipgrid is this wonderful app where you are able to basically go out online, create a discussion topic for your class, and then you ask your students to respond to that discussion topic using a video. So you set the time of the video. So say you set the time for 2.5 minutes. The students have the opportunity to create a video response, but they also have this opportunity to add color, to their video. They can add emojis and all these different wonderful graphics to their video in order to personalize that. And the most beautiful thing about it too, I think, is that after their videos are all done, they can share as a group. So all the other students have this opportunity to see what their peers are doing in a more creative kind of way. So it's not just a video, it's something where they get to personalize it and have some fun with it as well. And you also as a teacher can create a video too. So if you haven't seen it yet, I totally suggest to go and check it out. Even if this is just that one step towards bringing media into your classroom, I suggest giving it a shot to start out. Now, ways to bring media into your classroom, one being Flipgrid. Sorry, just one second, I'm going backwards here. Other ways to bring it in would be, as simple as responses, presentations, reviews, reenact the scene from a play or a book, create a stop motion animation, documentary. There's all these different things that students can do. And I think it's very important that if you're kind of feeling as though maybe this would be a big jump for you, start small. Again, ask your students maybe in this first little bit to do videos of them doing a response to a book, for example. And at the end, perhaps you can have them do a video starting to introduce the idea of the skills that would take, or the kind of steps and skills that they would need to produce that final video for that book review. But slowly stepping yourself there as well. The students, I think, would have an absolute joy in working step by step with video, from a review to a full-fledged video, maybe at the end of the year. Now, the benefits, wonderful benefits for the students, obviously critical thinking, problem solving, analytical strategies, demonstrating understanding, practice community building, revising, reflecting, and technical skills. These are all wonderful things that they can get out of this and more. For an instructor, variety in your lessons, ease of use, as well as new methods of sharing ideas and contents, easy to review and mark, presentations made easy, promoting creative thinking, self-expression, and low budget, which is also very key in our classrooms. Now, it is easy from home or school to do this. It's flexible, it's lovely, and it's such a powerful tool for youth to have a way to express themselves in different ways. So I hope that you had a good time today in our seminar and our PD session. And if you have any questions now, I would love to hear them.
Thanks so much, Katie, for your wonderful presentation. So I have a couple questions for you. When it comes to future careers and future opportunities, would you say that learning media in the classroom, like in high school or even elementary school, will be beneficial for careers down the line? Like, do you think it'll be like useful for them to like consume media in the classroom specifically?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the wonderful thing about it is that it's an opportunity for students to be creative, obviously, but there's many different ways that people can use video in the future, not just as going into the profession, into the field of videography and editing and such, but also too, I mean, if you're looking at different ways to build presentations, it's a wonderful way for a student to learn how to present to a company, for one example of how to do something outside of videography. Um, I think also it's just a wonderful opportunity to try different ways of self-expression.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. We talked about a little bit about this before the seminar, but you had said that and you said in your presentation too, that it's great for even reflections and like um, giving students the opportunity to like tape themselves and retape themselves. Have you ever had any experience with that in your classroom where some students did prefer that type of expressing themselves through video?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I did mean to mention this before. I think that it's important that students get that opportunity to have different ways of expressing the way that they want to think. Some students just do not want to write. It's just not
Mhm,
their thing.
mhm,
And another way of being able to express yourself is just to be able to use your own words and just talk on the fly.
mhm.
And like you had mentioned too, being able to talk on the fly and be able to stop it and go, oh, no, 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 reset, allows the student the flexibility and the security of knowing that they can redo what they just said
Yeah.
and basically put their best forwards before they present. And also on top of it too, there are some students who fear presenting in front of the classroom. This could be potentially an option for a student who has a fear of presenting in front of the classroom.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Um, Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Katie, for coming on and sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. We appreciate it so much, and we hope to have you on again. So, yes, thank you to everyone here that is watching today. We so appreciate your involvement. Just to let you know, just to reiterate, the 2021 Youth Film Festival submissions are now open. So head over to our website, fcff.ca, and head over to the Youth Fest page. We have tons of information there regarding categories and guidelines, how to submit a film through Film Freeway. We also have a lot of exciting resources on there for your students, so please go check out our website. And as always, you can head over to the educators portal for more resources and recordings of our past seminars. So please do check that out. This seminar will be recorded and posted on the educators portal, along with Matt's presentation and also a supplementary handout with some exercises, editing exercises, lighting exercises that you and your class might find useful. If you did find this helpful and you think it'll benefit your class, we do think sharing it with your students is a great opportunity. We would love it if you shared it with your students. We also just wanted to let you know that the Western Smartphone Film Festival is happening on February 11th, 2021. And we just thought, it would be a great opportunity for your students to go check out the competition and see how video has expanded and become so accessible that they themselves can submit a film that was done completely on their smartphone. So we hope you found some of the information in here useful today, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.